Over these last days, the question has been asked, where do we find ourselves and what happens when the mind no longer has any roost on which to rest on any of the three levels of mind? That level of the nitty-gritty where karma and cause and effect exist, on that level of the arcane or the occult, or that level of the transcendental. Or in Hindu terms, the mind is no longer bound by rajas, tamas and sattva, movement, inertia and balance, or even Satchitananda, existence, knowledge and bliss. These are all levels of mind. Where are we and what happens when we're no longer bound within the confines of existence relative to mind? There's a Hindu story about the great sage, Pandit and scholar called Nerada. Nerada was Hindu, and he was a great devotee of the god Vishnu. And one time, when Nerada was wandering as a mendicant, he came into a village and got into conversation with a merchant there. And after a time of a very convivial exchange, the merchant invited Nerada back to his home for an evening meal. When they came back to the house, the wife prepared a delicious feast for them. But after the meal was over, Nerada said to the merchant, "Why is your wife so sad?" And he said, "After eating a delicious meal like this, my heart is usually light and lifted, but I feel a great sadness." The merchant looked at him and said, "Oh, you really are a very great sage. Yes, my wife is sad and I am sad because we have longed for a child. We've prayed, we've been to physicians, we've been to soothsayers, and it is said that it is not possible for us to beget an offspring." Nerada said, do you have your horoscopes?" And the merchant said, "Yes, we have horoscopes cast by the great astrologers, the greatest astrologer in the land." And Nerada said, "Bring them to me." So the merchant bought the astrological charts and Nerada studied them. And then he looked at the palms of the merchant and his wife, and he shook his head and he said, yes, it is not your karma to have children." Well, Nerada took his leave with a great sadness in his heart. And after he left the merchant's house, he went into meditation under a tree and took himself to the abode of Vishnu. And there he asked the great god Vishnu. He said, "I've just had dinner with this merchant who, they are very fine people. They adhere to the Dharma, they give alms, they're very kind. Is there nothing that can be done for them?" The god Vishnu looked at Nerada and he said, "You know very well that the laws of karma are inviolable. In all of existence, in all of the realms, throughout all of the lifetimes, karma is the law. which cannot be broken. So, with a heavy heart of sadness, Nerada left Vishnu's realm and abode. But some years later, Nerada was on the road again and happened to be passing by the village in which the merchant lived. And so he thought he'd call in and see how he was faring. And when he arrived at the merchant's house and was greeted by the merchant was glowing and happy. And there in the yard was 3 children playing. Nerada said, "Well, whose children are these?" And the merchant said, "They're ours." Well, Nerada was very taken aback, but the merchant invited him in to now his family dinner, and they had a very wonderful and delicious repast. And afterwards, in great perplexity, Nerada again went into meditation and went up to the abode of Vishnu and said, "Vishnu, I've just been to the house of the merchant." And Vishnu said, "Yes, and he's got 3 children. And Nerada said, "Well, how can this be?" And Nerada said, "Well, after you had visited the merchant, a hermit beggar came by their house and said, 'Give an old beggar 1 loaf of bread for 1 child, 2 loaves of bread for 2 children, and 3 loaves of bread for 3 children.'" And the merchant had said, well, realizing that it was not in their karma to have children, nevertheless his heart was so good, he invited the hermit beggar back to his house and gave him a loaf of bread and another loaf of bread and another loaf of bread. And when he was leaving, the hermit said, "Well, now you will have 3 children." And indeed they did. "But why?" said Nerada. And Vishnu said, "That beggar was a great devotee of mine, a bhakta. And when a bhakta speaks, I have to obey." "But why?" said Nerada. Vishnu said, "Your mind is too agitated right now. I will give you an explanation. But let's go for a walk." So immediately they found themselves in a village situation. And as they were walking down the street, it was time for devotion. So the temple bells were ringing and you could hear chanting coming out from within. And all of a sudden, Vishnu collapsed, gripping his side in great pain. Falling to the ground, he said to Nerada, "Oh, help me. I had a meal given to me by several of my devotees that was cooked in rancid oil, and now my liver, I need a new liver as soon as possible." So immediately, Nerada ran off to the temple, ran into the temple and said, "Who will give their liver to the god Vishnu?" And they all laughed at him. He was crazy. And he said, "I'm not crazy, I'm Nerada, don't you know me?" And then Nerada went running off down the road and he came to the riverside where there were some beggars bathing. And he said, "Who will give their liver to the god Vishnu? He needs it immediately." And the several beggars that were there just laughed and thought he was crazy. And then they pointed to another old beggar who was standing nearby on one leg, his eyes closed, chanting, and intoning a mantra. And they said maybe he's stupid enough to do that. So Nerada went over to the old hermit and he said, Vishnu needs a liver. Would you be willing? The hermit beggar opened his eyes, lowered his leg and said, come to my hut. Nerada followed him to his hut. And the old hermit sat down and went into meditation for a brief moment or two. And then he took a knife and stabbed himself in the side and twisted the knife, blood pouring out. Taking out his liver, he handed it to Nerada and said, here, give this to the god Vishnu. So Nerada went immediately back, and here was Vishnu standing looking quite well, you don't mind. But Nerada handed him the liver and said, here, it was given by an old beggar hermit by the river. And the god Vishnu said, but don't you have a liver? Why did you not give me yours? Oh, said Nerada, I didn't think, said Nerada. And when you went into the temple and asked others, were you not aware that yourself having this liver? No, waffle, said Nerada. Ah, said Vishnu, you see, even though you are a very great devotee of mind, you are still attached to those dimensions, your body and life and knowledge, and even the bliss that you attain to be able to come to my abode. And before Narada's eyes, Vishnu's face became the face of the old beggar hermit. And he said, this bhakta, this great devotee of mine, when he speaks, I must obey. Taking this story to the level where we can equate it metaphorically to the question that's being asked, where are we and what happens when we are no longer bound in the three levels, dimensions of mind, which includes that movement, inertia and balance, or existence, knowledge and bliss. This story says it for us, but to reach an understanding of it, we have to translate. We have to translate from our own experience what a bhakta, what a devotee means when, for us, when all levels of mind have been effaced, there's no roost, there's no God, there's nothing to worship, there's nothing to adore. So here's a poser for you. From your experience, where you are now, what is a bhakta? What is this that Vishnu calls my great devotee? When he speaks, I have to obey. When we can answer these questions, we can move on to the recognition of what it is that allows us, when we're beyond the thrall of cause and effect, the seduction of the powers of the occult and the arcane, and not blissed out in the need to transcend what it is that functions in our life. And when we speak, it's obeyed. Where are we? What happens when we're no longer bound by the thrall, the levels and dimensions